Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management will begin shortly at 9:20. We kindly ask all participants to enter the hall and take your seats. For the smooth progress of the forum, please set your mobile phones to silent or vibration mode. Simultaneous interpretation is available during the forum for your convenience. Channel 1 for Korean and Channel 2 for English. Please select your preferred channel to follow the session. The forum will soon begin, so we ask everyone to be seated. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management, held as part of the Korea Maritime Week 2025. This forum is hosted by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and co-hosted by the Korea Research Institute of Ships and Oceans Engineering, the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology, the Korea Marine Equipment Research Institute, the Korea Maritime Institute, and the Korean Register. In addition, today's forum is being streamed live on YouTube. My name is Daya Kim, and I'm honored to serve your MC today. The International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management is a side event of the Korea Maritime Week 2025. This forum has been organized to share scientific and technical insights on preventing the spread of invasive aquatic species and to discuss key considerations and future directions for the upcoming IMO discussions on the development of a legally binding framework, which are set to begin next year. Before we officially begin the forum, let me briefly introduce today's program. Today's schedule consists of 3 sessions followed by a panel discussion. Session 1 will feature 3 expert presentations under the theme, The Need for Ships Biofouling Management. And Session 2 will focus on policy and practice sharing from member states. And Session 3 will be held under the theme, Current Status and Prospects in Korea. After the panel discussion, we will have a closing ceremony which will include a lucky draw event. So if you haven't submitted your business card yet upon entry, please drop it into the collection box at the registration desk during the break, and we kindly ask you to stay with us until the closing ceremony. And now we would like to officially begin the forum. We will first have opening remarks from Mr. Chang-Sop Nam, Director of the Maritime Industry and Technology Division at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
네, 여러분 반갑습니다.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nam Chang-seok, Director of the Maritime Industry and Technology Division at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. It is my great pleasure to host the first International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management here in Korea, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you. First and foremost, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to the officials of the CRISO, KIOS, KOMERI, KMI, and Korean Register for their dedicated efforts in preparing for the successful hosting of this forum. I would also like to convey my heartfelt thanks to Harry Conway, Chair of the MEPC, for traveling to Korea to deliver his congratulatory address. I also extend my sincere gratitude to all presenters, including Colin Haining from Transport Canada, Peter Wilkinson from DAF, Australia, Mark Rager from BIMA, and Bev McKinsey from BIMCO, who have joined us to contribute to today's meaningful discussions. Distinguished guests, we are all aware of the invaluable benefits that the natural ecosystem provides to humankind. Among these, our oceans play a particularly vital role regulating the climate, supporting biodiversity, and sustaining life on our planet. However, according to a recent report by the IPBES, human activities over the past 5 decades have placed unprecedented pressure on the natural environment. The report identifies the exploitation of marine resources, climate change, and the spread of invasive species as major drivers of this degradation. At present, it is estimated that around 2,000 invasive species are being introduced into new habitats worldwide through human activities, and at least 82 species out of them have been reported to spread via hull fouling, highlighting the urgent need for effective management. Distinguished guests, organisms and biofouling can unintentionally spread invasive species, posing serious threats to marine ecosystem. Beyond ecological damage, biofouling also leads to reduced fuel efficiency and increased greenhouse gas emission. These issues transcend national boundaries and cannot be addressed by any single country alone. Therefore, international cooperation and coordinated global actions are necessary. In recognition of this, the UN clause emphasizes the importance of international and regional efforts to protect the marine environment. And similarly, the CBD calls for concrete measures to prevent and control the introduction of invasive species into marine ecosystems. Building on these frameworks, the international community has already begun taking active steps. A particularly significant milestone was achieved when the IMO MEPC adopted the 2023 biofouling guidelines. This marks an important first step toward safeguarding marine biodiversity. Although these guidelines are currently voluntary and are not legally binding, discussions to establish a legally enforceable international convention are scheduled to begin next February. As discussions move toward establishing legally binding measures for biofouling management, today's forum serves as an important platform for collaboration and partnership with the global community. Korea is fully committed to contributing to these international efforts, and hosting this very forum is a reflection of the commitment. In particular, the Korean government is investing from 2021 to 2022 $20 million through national R&D projects to develop safe and environmentally friendly biofouling treatment technologies and to advance research on marine environmental risk assessment. Building on these outcomes of the initiatives, we aim to share our knowledge with experts at home and abroad and to continue shaping science-based policies. Distinguished guests, I'm confident that the dedication and insight of everyone gathered here today, including representatives of international organizations, policymakers, and research experts, will serve as a powerful driving force in our shared mission to protect the marine environment. Finally, I'd like to once again express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for joining us today. I hope that your participation in this forum and the Korea Maritime Week 2025 will be both meaningful and rewarding.
Thank you for organizing a venue to gather expert opinions so that Korea can secure leadership in the future international discussions. Thank you. And next, we will have a congratulatory remarks from Mr. Harry Conway, Chair of the Marine Environment Protection Committee at the International Maritime Organization. Please welcome him with a big hand.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, it's a pleasure to be in Korea. Good morning. And welcome to the opening ceremony of the first International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management. My name is Harry Conway, and I serve as the chair of the Marine Environment Protection Committee at the IMO, and also I'm the alternate permanent representative of Liberia to the IMO. First and foremost, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Chen Sam-nam, Director, Maritime Industry and Technology Division, as well as the dedicated teams of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, all the institutions and co-hosting. Your contribution and organizational brilliance have brought us all together here in Seoul, and for that, we thank you. And what a city to host such an event. Seoul, a place where tradition shakes hands with technology, and where Asian palaces stand proudly beside shimmering skyscrapers. A city as dynamic and forward-looking as the maritime industry itself. It is truly an honor to deliver this congratulatory speech at such an important gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to focus on a matter that silently travels across oceans, ships into harbors and ecosystems without a passport, that is biofouling. As many of you are aware, biofouling facilitates the transfer of invasive aquatic species, threatening marine biodiversity and disrupting fragile ecosystems. But the problem doesn't stop there. Biofouling also impacts ship performance, reduces fuel efficiency, and increases greenhouse gas emission, making it not just an ecological challenge, but also a technical and economic one. Tackling biofouling is therefore not just about saving marine ecosystem, it's also about saving fuel, and yes, even saving the planet. This forum marks a significant milestone, the first international forum dedicated solely to ship biofouling management. It offers a unique opportunity to share where we are, the policies, the practices, the science, and even the challenges. And more importantly, it invites us to shape where we go next. Looking ahead to the IMO's upcoming work on developing a legally binding instrument on biofouling starting next year, we must build on the strong foundation laid by the current IMO guidelines. But turning voluntary guidelines into mandatory, effective, and globally harmonized regulations will require more than technical expertise. It will require collaboration, commitment, and courage. The courage to innovate, the courage to compromise, and occasionally, the courage to admit, well, maybe that Banako had a point. On a serious note, this journey demands strong partnerships between regulators and industry, between researchers and practitioners, and between member states, each with unique maritime environments and challenges. I have every confidence that this forum will serve a catalyst for these essential conversations. Let us listen, let us learn, and let us lead together. So, to each of you here today, speak boldly, share generously, and collaborate fearlessly. The future of our oceans and our ships depends on the actions we take today. And finally, I would like to express my sincere hope that this first International Forum on Ships Biofouling Management does not only mark a successful beginning, but continues to grow, evolve, and strive in the years ahead, becoming a cornerstone for international cooperation and innovation in maritime environmental protection. Thank you, and may your discussions be productive, networks grow stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your valuable remarks. Thank you for honoring us with your presence as we are taking the first step. As mentioned earlier, we have 3 sessions and a panel discussion ahead of us. In each session, we will exchange experiences and insights. We will also hear how Korea is approaching these issues and explore areas where we may be able to move ahead of others. And before we begin the first session, let me remind you once again, simultaneous interpretation is available. Channel 1 is for Korean, Channel 2 for English. So please select your preferred channel to follow the session. And now we will proceed to session 1, titled Setting the Scene, Why Do We Need to Control and Manage Ships Biofouling? This session will provide an overview of international discussions on biofouling management and share implementation experiences from the shipping and industrial sectors. And we are going to have 3 experts for the session. And 3 experts will give us the presentation. So we have prepared a rich and meaningful programs for you today. Please stay with us until the end. To open the session, we will have a presentation on trends in international discussions by Mr. Myung-baek Son, Principal Surveyor at the Korean Register. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, so many audience here, even in the early morning. Yeah, thank you for your participation. My name is Son Myung-bae, and I have been working at Korean Register for the past 12 years. So that during this time, I have been deeply involved in addressing the issue of species invasion via ships, particularly in relation to ballast water management. My work has included the conducting type approval for ballast water management systems and supporting the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and participating the IMO meetings. About 5 years ago, another critical issue began to draw my attention. It was the ship's biofouling. Since then, I have taken part in discussion on this topic, including revising biofouling guidelines and development of guidance for in-water cleaning of ships' biofouling. Today, I would like to share with you the recent decisions made at IMO regarding ships' biofouling management. Invasive aquatic species have been introduced into marine ecosystems around the world. Well-known examples, excuse me, sorry, yeah. The well-known examples include the zebra mussel, the green algae, jellyfish, starfish, harmful algal species. Once these species are transported from their native habitats and successfully adapt to new environments, they often outcompete native species for food and space. This leads to serious ecological consequences, such as the decline or elimination of native species, which threatens the biodiversity. In addition, outbreaks of harmful algae or mussels can pose risk to public health and negatively impact industries such as aquaculture and coastal infrastructure. As you can see, invasive species can be transferred through ships. The hull fouling and ballast water are two major pathways for this transfer. In 2004, Ballast Water Management Convention was adopted and it entered into force on September 8, 2017. Meanwhile, excuse me, in 2011, the guidelines for biofouling management were adopted at MEPC 632. The biofouling guidelines have been revised, and this slide presents the contents of the 2023 version. So what has changed compared to the 2011 version? From my personal perspective, the 2023 guidelines offer the more specific recommended standards and much more detailed best practices. For example, Chapter 6 provides guidance on how to select, install, reinstall, reapply, or repair anti-fouling systems. Chapter 7 outlines when, how, and what types of contingency plans should be used. The guidelines also included recommendation for biofouling inspection scheme and rating scales in Chapter 8, along with suggested actions based on the extent of biofouling. Chapter 9 introduces procedure for proactive cleaning and reactive cleaning, as well as a procedure for recycling facilities. Let's take a look at the overall flow chart for biofouling management. This diagram also included in the 2023 biofouling guidelines. After installing an anti-fouling system and developing a biofouling management plan, the ship monitors biofouling and fuel performance using remote monitoring system, then reports, and scheduled in-water inspections as outlined in the biofouling management plan. If no risk for biofouling accumulation was identified, the ship continued regular monitoring of biofouling and fuel performance. However, if a risk is detected, the ship carries out a contingency in order inspection to determine the location and extent of firefouling. Based on findings, the ship performs in-water cleaning and may repair or maintain anti-fouling system as needed. All biofouling management activities are recorded in biofouling record book. Current anti-fouling systems are generally effective, but they do not completely prevent biofouling on the hull or in niche area. Therefore, in-water cleaning is often necessary to reduce surface roughness on hull and improve the fuel efficiency. In some cases, in-water cleaning of niche areas must be performed before entering the territory waters of certain countries in accordance with their specific requirements. As shown on this slide, many in-water cleaning devices generate clouds in water column, which contain debris, biocides, microplastics, and other waste materials. Even if these substances are released into marine environments, they can contaminate the water and allow viable organisms within debris to settle and establish themselves. This undermined the purpose of the biofouling guidelines, which aim to prevent the spread of invasive species and protect the marine ecosystems. Although the 2023 biofouling guidelines recommend capturing waste during in-water cleaning, more detailed and practical guidance as well was still needed to ensure effective and environmentally safe operation. To address these concerns, the guidance on in-water cleaning of ships biofouling was developed and approved at MEPC 83 earlier this year. The guidance provides a comprehensive framework from selecting appropriate in-water cleaning systems to reporting upon completion of cleaning activities. It also outlines the procedure for the approval of cleaning operations, including specific requirements for in-water cleaning service providers. Furthermore, it details recommends related to the approval of in-water cleaning systems, including recommended system designs and specification, minimum performance standards, and verification procedures. A proposal to develop a legal binding framework for biofouling management was submitted to MEPC 83, and it was approved. This marks the beginning of a formal discussion on mandatory requirements for biofouling management. We have been addressing many issues related to harmful aquatic organisms at the IMO. As shown in this slide, the photo on the lower left that captures the IMO plenary session, while the one on the lower right shows the working group. You may not immediately recognize the individuals in the working group photo, to which I took during the last PPR session. I'm here, as you can see. The picture of my colleague is Colin is here. Yeah, and Peter is here, and Mark is here. If I recall correctly, Bev McKenzie actively participated online at that time. Today, they all come here to share their insights and experiences on biofouling issues. Thank you very much for all of you, and welcome to Korea. First and foremost, to establish such a mandatory instrument, we must define the goal of biofouling management. I believe that the goal should be for ships to maintain clean hulls in order to minimize or prevent transfer of harmful aquatic organisms. I expect that most of member most of member states will be able to agree with this object. To achieve this goal, we will need provisions such as regulations, rules, standards covering testing and verification, survey, certification, inspections, documentation, record keeping, and enforcement. Additionally, to support stakeholders in complying with these regulations and standards, we will need to develop guidelines. Starting from PPR 13, we will embark on a journey to develop a legally binding framework by 2029 in accordance with the timeline presented on this slide. My presentation concludes here. If you have any questions to my presentation, please feel free to ask me during the coffee break, not now, due to time constraints. As you can see from the forum schedule, we have full lineup of presentation ahead, and I'm looking forward to hearing the insight from the other speakers. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Son. You were able to know current status of international discussions on the biofouling management. Thank you. And next, we will move on to the second presentation. Mr. Mark Rigo, Technical Director at Ballast Water Equipment Manufacturers Association, is going to give us a presentation on sharing technical and operational measures for biofouling management. Please welcome him with a big hand.
안녕하세요. Thank you to everyone, especially thank you to the Korean Department of Ministries of Fisheries and Ocean for inviting us here to participate. I'm with the Ballast Water Manufacturers Association. I don't know why that just advanced. Okay, we'll stick with that. I'm with the Ballast Water and Environmental Manufacturers Association. We are a trade association that represents manufacturers of equipment which pertain to the environmental protection and reducing the environmental footprint of shipping. We specialize in ballast water and biofouling management equipment, as well as support companies that provide additional help into this industry. Here are some of our charter members. Here are some of our full members. I think we have a hull cleaning company here. Hopefully we can add them to the slide coming up here. I saw them out in the front. And then we have a number of associate members as well, which are companies that help provide services, testing, and the like into this industry. So as my good friend Sean just talked about, we have work ongoing at the IMO to develop a legally binding instrument for the control of ships biofouling in order to stop the spread of aquatic invasive species. Those of you who have been at the IMO know each one of those words is very important. It's a title, but each of those words has an important aspect. And as Sean very carefully and very nicely laid out, there is a plan for the development of this instrument. I took a little more of a graphical approach to taking a look at it, but the work started at MEPC 83. With the starting of this work, it will commence officially at PPR 13 and is expected to end at MEPC 89, at which point it will likely enter some sort of a ratification phase, similar to ballast water. And what I want to talk about today with this group is that when we write regulation, the details really matter. Each word is very important. So when we're developing this regulation, it's important for us to be thinking about how will ships demonstrate compliance? Will the mandatory instrument allow cleaning without capture, or will it mandate capture? Will the mandatory instrument compel flag states, if they adopt it, to allow cleaning in their waters? That's not currently allowed in some flag states. But probably most importantly is, what is the performance standard for the mandatory instrument? We still don't really know what that is. And when I say that details matter, when we look at successful environmental regulations, they involve balancing three key concerns. The first of those concerns is environmental risk. Obviously, this is very important. But we also have to look at what is the capability of technology. Simply assessing risk without looking at what technology can do is not going to generate the right type of regulation. But also, lastly, we need to be aware of what the cost of that regulation is. And we need to look at how the intersection of those three concerns can really generate what I like to call the regulatory sweet spot. And if we do this and we create a regulation that falls into this spot, it can work for all stakeholders, addressing all of the primary concerns. And so it's really important as we begin this process, because this process will begin in February, that we look to our past and say, what have we done well and what have we done badly in the past, to hopefully be able to move forward better in the future. And we don't have to look far back. Well, we have to look some 25 years. Actually, we have to look back to when I was in Korea the last time. Well, not the last time, but when I lived in Korea. Because I lived in Korea from 2001 to 2004. A wonderful time. I'm happy to be back. But in this time, at that time, they were developing a thing called the Ballast Water Management Convention. And that Ballast Water Management Convention and the implementation of that convention has not gone well. I don't think I'm telling anybody something they don't know. And so when we look at that convention, we can actually see some lessons that maybe we should learn when we're implementing this convention and when we're moving forward with this convention so that we don't have some of the same issues. And I apologize for the next few slides because I'm going to introduce to you a project that BEMA has begun, and we call it BRAD. And BRAD is the Biofouling Research and Data Development Program. And BRAD is a multifaceted program that seeks to answer a number of key questions that we look at based upon our experience from ballast water as being important to answer during the development of a biofouling mandatory instrument. And BRAD is really a project that's designed to feed information to the IMO. Information that now that they maybe haven't asked for, but information that we strongly believe they are going to need. So I'm going to walk quickly through the next few slides because we do have a fairly limited timetable. I trust that the slides will be available afterwards, so please feel free to read the sub-questions. But BRAD is looking to answer 7 core questions. The first core question is what technologies, products, practices exist to prevent biofouling accumulation on ships' hulls. I can assure you that we talk about hull cleaning, but there are a lot of different other aspects. There are a lot of other different technologies, marine growth prevention systems, coating additives, things that we can do to ship design, things that we can do to improve the performance of shipping that's not cleaning. And so what exists? How are we going to incorporate that ecosystem of solutions into our regulation? Second, the risk to the environment from invasive species delivered as macrofouling is unquestioned. But what about microfouling? In ballast water, we had a situation where a ship sucked all of the organisms that were in the water, they carried them across a natural barrier, and then they deposited them. And so everything that was in that water was very important. With microfouling, you're talking about a subset of organisms, a small amount of organisms that attach themselves to a hull, can survive the journey unprotected by the ballast tank, not in a warm and loving environment like they were in a ballast tank, and then will choose to detach once it gets to a new port, a new area. That's necessarily a smaller set of organisms than all. And so what does that look like? What does that really mean? Because it's very important. if we can prevent the accumulation of microfouling, we can prevent the accumulation of macrofouling. Next, what is the actual risk of cleaning without capture? One thing that we don't always consider, most hull coatings are ablative, which means they're literally falling off the ship as the ship runs through the water, trying to knock the marine organisms off. So most anti-fouling paints, or many anti-fouling paints, are already hull cleaning without capture. So what is our risk? And how, if we assess this risk properly, can potentially we look at changing the types of paints that we're using and then not have some of those microplastics, not have some of those other issues, not have the paint literally falling off the ship as it drives through the water. Very important to look at each of these questions holistically. Fourth, what is a reasonably capable, a reasonably achievable capture standard? It's not 100%, but it's not zero. It shouldn't be zero. We should be capturing macrofouling. We should be capturing paint as it's coming off of the vessel during a cleaning. So what does that mean? What is a good level of capture? How do we prove compatibility? I love this picture. This picture was actually taken somewhere just down south. And this is, of course, what we don't want to see. We don't want to see a hull that's obviously had its paint scraped off of it by some sort of a brush. But this isn't cleaning of microfouling. This is cleaning of significant macrofouling. So how do we prove compatibility with paints? How do we make sure that paint manufacturers are providing the information that cleaning companies need to be able to design their products? Sixth, what is the true capacity for cleaning with capture? Because if we create a standard that requires capture, quick top of the envelope math would tell you that we need a lot of filtration systems, which is going to be great for some manufacturers. They're going to build a lot of systems, but they also need a lot of divers. And unfortunately, we can't just build more divers, more commercial divers. And that's a skill set, and that's a very dangerous job that we may or may not want to be just saying, oh, we should throw 90,000 divers into the water to engage in hull cleanings. And last, and this is an interesting question because this was presented to us through interaction with the industry and interaction with ship owners, is what does compliance really look like? So what's a measurable performance standard? How do you demonstrate that? What types of inspections? How are those inspections conducted? How is independence maintained? What are the mechanisms we can put in place to streamline compliance monitoring? Because candidly, with ballast water, this is one of the hardest aspects of the convention. Nobody wants to sample the outlet water, so how do we know the ballast water management system is discharging properly? It's very difficult. Maybe we need to think about how we're going to measure it when we actually write the performance standard. So, again, thank you all for being here today, because I'm giving you this presentation not to tell you what BEMA is doing, but to ask for your help. The BRAD project is about a collaboration between all stakeholders, ship owners, administrations, NGOs, IGOs, the IMO, everyone. How can we get together and get this information in one place? We are willing to manage this process. We're working with other groups that are doing the same thing. How do we get this information put together and delivered to the IMO on time to impact the development of this mandatory instrument? I welcome, I'll be out during the coffee break. I welcome exchanging any cards. It is not restricted just to BEMA members. We are open to collaboration with anybody who wants to participate. This is an open project. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rigo, for your insightful presentation. And next, Ms. Bev McKinsey, Head of IGO Engagement at Baltic International Maritime Council, is going to speak on implementation of a biofouling convention. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the organizers for the invitation to speak today. My name is Dr. Bev McKenzie. I am Head of Intergovernmental Engagement at BIMCO. For those of you in the room who don't know BIMCO, we are the world's largest direct entry membership organization for ship owners. We represent around 64% of the global cargo tonnage. But time is very short, so I'll dive right in. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what we already know about how ships are managing their biofouling and how this might integrate within the development of the legal framework. But as a scientist, it's important for me to demonstrate where our evidence comes from. And since 2018, we've run a set of surveys every 3 years amongst the industry to gather some of this information. You have to kind of take it all as a satellite view, because we have very few repeat companies, ship owners, doing the surveys each year. And when we did have the same company, it might not necessarily be the same individual or the person doing the same role in that company. So it's a very high-level satellite view, and each survey has looked at a slightly different aspect. So the first one was really focusing on the anti-fouling coatings and systems used. The second one went into a bit of a deeper dive, had lots more ships, and that's because of the timing. This was during the preparation of the guidelines, so our owners wanted to tell us more. And then last year we looked a lot more into in-water cleaning. We also consult with our Marine Environment Committee. They are a group of our members that set our strategic direction, and they give us very high-level insights as to what they're doing, and it helps us set our way forward. And as Mark mentioned, there's a lot of unanswered questions, so we will also need to carry on this process as we move into the framework development. So anyone who was lucky to join us in Busan last year for the glow fouling event, you'll have seen this slide before, and it really provides a very high-level view of what we know ships are already doing. Now, of course, we asked the question in a survey about biofouling management, so we already prejudiced our results because most people who replied were already doing biofouling management. We weren't going to get people answering the survey that weren't. But we know that nearly all ships are selecting an anti-fouling system. And quite comforting was that they're nearly all selecting this based on the ship's profile and its service period, not on cost. So ship owners understand the benefit, really, of managing the whole well, primarily for the savings on efficiency. But we've also seen a big uptake in people having a specific biofouling management plan. There's no standardization, so we don't know whether they all look alike or have the same, but just by having the plan is increased. And we've also seen more ships doing performance monitoring and self-inspections. And they're two of the topics I'll go into in a bit more detail. So there are many questions. I only have 3, not quite as many as Mark. I could have done more, but time is short. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 elements that we really, our members are concerned about, or that we think will prevent some challenges and opportunities during the development of this framework. So I'll talk a bit about performance monitoring and inspections, what an inspection regime could or might look like, and in-water cleaning. And I think we'll explore that a bit more in the panel session 2. So I won't repeat what's in the guidelines. Again, I hope you get the slides afterwards. But performance monitoring is mentioned in the guidelines, and it's related to the inspection and how frequent that may need to be. But the important thing to note about performance monitoring is this bottom part, which is it's a lagging indicator of biofouling. So how are ships actually doing it and using it? So we asked the question, and we asked similar questions in 2024 and 2021. about how ships are doing this. Are they using physical inspection? Are they using performance monitoring? And again, all of these things have gone up. So ships are much better, and ship owners are much better at collecting the performance data they need because they're doing it for their energy efficiency purposes. But they're doing it in very different ways, multiple ways. Some ships are doing, have full online whole monitoring systems. Some are using their noon reports and against good weather reports and speed trials. Again, there's no standardization in how this actually works. So we've asked the question, we asked this to our Environment Committee, how are you using performance monitoring? So we know that over 75% of ships are doing some kind of performance monitoring related to their fuel efficiency. So it's a high uptake. And then they'll do some kind of analytics on this. And again, this is not standardized. They'll often have ship-specific bespoke tools that they've paid companies for. This could be the paint companies, the weather routing companies. Lots of different companies are carrying out these kind of analytics. They'll then look at the analytics and say, okay, so what's actually happening here? Again, that can be done by the weather routing company, look at the speed trials, lots of different things. And then there might be an inspection. So we've already got kind of 4 things happening before someone says, right, now we need to go and have a look. And even that inspection is very different depending on the ship owner. It might be they have a charter party agreement and they think, right, now we have to, our agreement means we have to go check the condition of the hull. Some of them have cameras, so they can just look at the hull mounted camera and see whether they're spotting anything. And so there's lots of different ways. So of course, if this is going to be used in a legal framework, either with the framework itself or within guidelines, there will be some questions. There's going to need to be some standardization so it can be trusted information. But also, a lot of this data is commercially sensitive. You know, the ship is efficient, it's doing well. And so how will this be shared? In what format may it be shared to satisfy the authorities if we're using performance monitoring as an indicator of biofouling? So then we move on to inspections. So we've talked a bit about performance monitoring. And at the moment, we're looking at the guidelines that there's a lot of different organizations that can do inspections, and the crew can also do these inspections too. And in reality, the ship is really self-inspecting at the moment. So we asked, why are you inspecting? So what are these kind of trigger points for when a ship will do an inspection? And because these are hull inspections, I will talk about niche areas at the end. Again, it's the performance monitoring. So the fuel, if they're noticing a performance change in the ship, maybe using more fuel, that will trigger this. In most cases, that is the trigger of an inspection. But there are other reasons. So a risk assessment, so that maybe the operational profile is slightly different from the operational profile they used when the paint was selected. They've maybe gone through some tropical waters or some high productivity waters that they weren't planning on going through, so the risk is increased. Idling and layups, particularly in terms of charter party agreements, that's a requirement that the inspection will need to be taken place. The ports and coastal waters, when you need to do an inspection for the mandatory regimes, new contracts, for example, and there's always the kind of fixed inspections as well, but they're less, the fixed inspections are less predominant. And how are they doing it? Mostly with divers, sending divers into water. Sometimes you arrive at port, the crew go out and they have a quick visual inspection. A few are using ROVs, and then we've started seeing these new crew using some underwater cameras and also GoPros attached to the ship's hull. But we are still in a kind of traditional, in what we'd call a more traditional inspection regime where a diver will go down. So when we come to a legal framework, what's going to be interesting is these trigger points for these inspections. If it's not a fixed inspection regime. And there's a big variety in when these might need to be done given the operation of the ship. But it is important to realise that, as we've just seen, ships are doing frequent inspections of both their hull and propellers, just to make sure that the ship is operating as efficiently as it can be. Again, niche areas are slightly different. Our members felt it's very important that the standardization occurs in these independent inspection processes. Independence for a mandatory inspection was very important, and the qualifications of those people doing those inspections, but capacity issues have been something that have worried us for a while. Mark said, you know, it takes a long time to build divers. It's also going to take a long time to build an army of biofouling inspectors. Not many of them exist around the world. And we're also seeing ROVs now being increasingly used. Some owners have their own. They own their own ROVs. Some use a service provider. But there's no standardization on this either. So type approval and standards and how the ROV is used to measure the biofouling are going to be very important. The ship owner wants to know that the equipment that they're using is trustworthy and can be trusted. And of course, the administrations will want to know the same. And then cleaning. So cleaning is kind of, we've always kind of considered it that if your performance monitoring shows you have some fouling, you do your inspection, your visual inspection shows you have fouling, then you clean. So the cleaning is something that we are concerned about in a convention, due to all the questions Mark raised in his presentation too, and particularly the local authority, and the local regulations. But what are we actually seeing within water cleaning? This is a bit of a confusing graph, I apologize. The bars show absolute numbers, and this is how long after the AFS installation is the first cleaning. And in our survey that we did previously in 2021, with the exception of the hard coatings, the ships with the hard coatings, nearly everyone was doing a first cleaning within dry dock, so the 2.5-year dry dock schedule, or only in its next dry dock, so the 5 years. This is a very good indication that in nearly all circumstances, the anti-fouling systems work very effectively. I don't think there's any question that the anti-fouling systems don't work effectively. We see very few issues of failure, and when they are, they're nearly always in the installation because of the installation maybe being too high temperatures or something's happened in the shipyard. But what we've actually seen, if you look at the lines, the percentages, is that actually the ships are cleaning more frequently now. A lot of ships, the average has kind of gone up, that the ships are cleaning within a year or much more frequently. So the question is, are we seeing a trend toward a more proactive cleaning practice? And you know, our high-level data would suggest that yes, in fact, we are. In the first survey, the earlier survey, we saw very few cases of any ships doing any proactive cleaning or hull grooming. But now we are seeing much more proactive cleaning and slightly less reactive cleaning. But what is interesting, and we mentioned this, is that a diver using a brush is still the most common way of cleaning a ship. And the bottom pie chart shows actually what happens in these cases of reactive cleaning, is that it's nearly all just a ship dropping an anchor and getting a diver out who cleans the ship. So we think about this new illegal instrument, and we're thinking a lot in our minds about ROVs and these advanced technologies, but the reality is still that in most cases, if a ship has a cleaning issue, it will drop its anchor, it will get a diver out, and it will clean wherever it is in the world. And we still have a significant amount of barriers to in-water cleaning. Again, I showed this last year, and it covers all the types of cleaning: reactive, proactive, and propeller polishing. And the barriers are significant in nearly all cases. Nearly all ships that had to clean had shown that there were significant barriers with the regulatory and local kind of enforcement and procedures. Weather is always an issue. We can't do much about that, but weather and visibility will be key when we're looking at where you can clean. and where you can't. And also the reliability and technology readiness and proactive cleaning and crew training are all critical issues there that will need to be addressed. And I think we can discuss that further in the panel. And we know that the in-water cleaning services are going to be important. In the case that the systems can't maintain the fouling-free surface, the only thing you can do is to remove your biofouling using in-water cleaning. You know, going to a dry dock for a clean is practically impossible. And we do know that there's a lack of in-water cleaning facilities worldwide in the event of a legal instrument. At the moment, our members don't seem to think that there's a lack, that there's enough now for their needs, but there won't be. But we do need the coastal and port states to facilitate this and to allow this. And hopefully, with a legal instrument, we may lift some prohibitions that we see in countries that would make life easier. And I've got one more slide with no time to go. So I haven't talked about niche areas because I've talked more about the performance monitoring in relation to fouling. But our members are actually already managing niche areas quite effectively. We know that at least 50% of the companies in the last survey are employing multiple niche area management strategies. So they are thinking about it even without a legal instrument in place. But what may be of concern coming forwards is the role of ultrasonics. And ultrasonics are considered an effective way of managing niche areas. But we also have some concerns with underwater noise, underwater radiating noise, and both ourselves and ICS already recommend that you don't use ultrasonics in marine protected areas. And we have heard anecdotally that you can pick up noise from those ships that are using them. So this is going to be another challenge that we will need to convey. And then finally, as Mark's did, you know, this is about collaboration. We do need to not repeat the mistakes that we've made in ballast water, and we're in a privileged position that nearly all of us in the room worked on the Ballast Convention, so if we make the mistakes, we only have ourselves to blame. But I think we need to do this, and, you know, I've mentioned the 3 topics, and we are the same, you know, in the same situation. We need to work out what data we need to collect from our members, and what information they're going to be willing to share. We do need to look at this inspection regime. How are we going to find these inspectors? How are we going to use the technologies and tools we already have in a standardized way? And then the big question is, how can we assure that the ships are having this access to in-water cleaning globally, and that the technologies are both safe and environmentally sustainable to use and facilitate approvals. And thank you very much. I can also be caught at the coffee break, and you may contact us on the following. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the informative presentation. Our sincere thanks to the 3 speakers for enriching us for the session 1. Before we begin the second session, I would like to remind you once again, simultaneous interpretation is provided, channel 1 for Korean, channel 2 for English. And now we will begin session 2 under the theme Policy and Practice Sharing from Member States. In this session, we will hear from Australia and Canada, 2 countries leading international efforts to prevent the spread of invasive aquatic species. To begin, Mr. Peter Wilkinson, Director of Biofouling and In-Water Cleaning at the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry of the Australian Government, will deliver a presentation on Share Australia's national regulation policy and experience. Please welcome him with a big hand.
Thank you. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to see some familiar faces and many I haven't met and hopefully will in the break. From nearly 15 years working in marine biosecurity policy, I have learnt one lasting lesson, and that's that successful policy only comes from incorporating information from a wide range of perspectives and from experts across multiple disciplines. The global success of biofouling management relies on sharing ideas, views, experiences, and just having conversations at forums like this. So I sincerely thank the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, all those involved in organising, particularly the secretariats, for providing the opportunity to hear from some distinguished speakers, and for providing me the opportunity to speak on Australia's biofouling management policy and our evolving approach to policy development. As the Director of Biofouling and In-Water Cleaning, I lead a team responsible for designing and implementing our national policy and regulatory systems. And we aim to manage unacceptable biosecurity risks associated with biofouling on international vessel arrivals. We have two main objectives. The first is to implement an effective biosecurity system, a system that focuses on prevention of invasive aquatic species by reducing risks to a very low level. The second is efficiency. Adopt biosecurity policies and practices that have the least necessary impact on vessels to manage risk. We want to ensure that our regulatory interventions are commensurate with the risk. And these objectives, whilst they're for Australia's biosecurity system, are the same ones that we hold for global biofouling management. And the objectives we hope a legally binding framework through the IMO will help achieve. Australia's biofouling policy has changed over time, but in 2022, we implemented new biofouling management requirements. These are published online, and there are three key components to this. The first is mandatory pre-arrival reporting for all ships. The second is incentives for vessels to adopt biofouling management practices prior to arrival that are proactive and effective. And the third is verification on arrival, because of course we have to check. Ships coming to Australia must pre-arrival report. They must use our maritime and aircraft reporting system to submit pre-arrival. They must declare for biofouling if they comply with three proactive biofouling management options which are set out in our Australian biofouling management requirements. There's the implementation of an effective biofouling management plan, cleaned biofouling within 30 days prior to arrival, or have implemented an alternative biofouling management method. And since implementing this, the vast majority of vessels implement an effective biofouling management plan. And although an alarming number of them in the first year were reporting an alternative biofouling management method, despite us not having approved a single one. Ships must also declare their intention to in-water clean in Australia. And that's important for us to not only to understand the potential risk of their entry, but how that might change also. Vessels do have to declare changes to their intentions to us. And vessels that don't declare compliance with any of the three options are required to provide additional information and questions not on the screen. And that informs our assessment of biosecurity risks. All vessels are subject to verification on arrival, and we have a number of powers in order to manage biosecurity risks that we deem unacceptable. So there are minimum standards that we have in our biofouling management requirements. And the minimum standards include those, or really adopted, adapted from the IMO guidelines. What's important here is that in the process of shifting from guidance to something that's required, we re-look at elements of those guidelines and realize that we can't require all ships to have all of them. And so our minimum standards are essentially a subset of those guidelines. And this is something that, again, the process at the IMO will look at again. So we have two appendix that list all of these requirements, and I welcome any of you to have a look at them and tell us where we got it wrong. That would be great as well. So moving on from what our requirements are, this slide goes into how we develop policy and how this is shifting. Biofouling risk management policy is complex to get it right. Now, Mark presented a fantastic Venn diagram with circles, which I absolutely love, and this is somewhat similar and describes the different elements that go into designing policy. So, taking this from a regulator perspective is to say that we require policy that manages not only biosecurity risks, but system risks and the strategic behavior risks. Now, I apologize to Bev because a lot of this is going to target vessel owners and operators, but there are many other elements and stakeholders involved in this who are also part of the strategic behaviors. So for the process to where we end up with an effective and efficient risk management policy, as Mark said, they're centered on the science. What is the risk? And what particular policy will reduce that risk to an acceptable level? We also need to have a huge amount of situational awareness. We need to understand whether that policy is actually going to be implementable. Are the ship owners and operators able to do this? Is the technology available now, or will it be in the future? What are the practices that exist? And part of this is so that we don't diverge, go down a path that ends up being more costly. We of course need to understand the legal parameters at the IMO, our own requirements, what are the limitations? And this is to understand whether really the policy that we want can actually be required. Can we mandate this? The role of economics for us has become more and more important. Traditionally, we've definitely looked at the costs and benefits of each policy option as we develop them, making sure that we choose the one that has the best net benefit. But more and more, we are now realizing the importance of human behaviors. And this tells us whether or not the policy that we develop, which might successful in reducing risk to an acceptable level due to the science, it might tell us that through situational awareness that the policy is implementable and we can legally do this. But the human behavior assessment tells us whether it will actually be done, whether ship owners will actually do what we're requiring. So in addition to what pretty much every speaker has said before now, is there is a huge number of experts that are needed for this process. I've just listed some. They're not even all of them. And in many cases, there are stakeholders and experts that cut across each of these areas. And this, although we rely on a deep technical knowledge of the science and we rely on the information that's out there from individual experts, particularly in the situational awareness, I work largely from home. I sit behind a desk. I very rarely get to go on vessels. I have never been in the water to in-water clean a ship. I have no intention of doing those things. But my own understanding of how to manage biofouling through policy and my team's ability to come up with policy relies on people who have those experiences. So I've italicized some of the experts that we've recently engaged with. So incentive design experts, market design experts, people who understand game theory and actuaries. For a lot of the biofouling policy space that I understand around the world, these are fairly foreign concepts, but they're integral. We're in the final stage of a multi-year research project to better understand how human behaviours and decision-making impacts the effectiveness of our policy. We've been working with economists and actuaries to look at biofouling risk management problem from a very different perspective. And some of this research goes into coming up with policy that they've considered as possible, which may never be actually be able to be done, but it's really informative to understand how they look at this and some of the problems that they identify. So overall, to be an effective biofouling management policy, we need to align the interests of vessel operators with the interests of regulators. We can simplify, and I do mean simplify, the interests of vessel operators down to profit and money. And we can simplify the interests of regulators down to managing biosecurity risks to an acceptable level. And when we develop a legally binding framework, we need to develop one that is incentive compatible, which means that the interests of vessel operators align with member states. And again, Bev, I'm sorry, I'm just saying vessel operators and owners here, but there are many others. This sounds simple, but how do we do this? How do we check that there is alignment? So one of the things we can do is consider biofouling risk management as this problem as a game. It's probably not a very fun game, but we can consider it as a game between regulators and vessel operators. As a regulator, our objective is to design the game so that the best strategy for vessel operators, that optimal strategy, is to play the game as it's designed and to choose compliant action. And if the policy is not incentive compatible, then vessel operators will not choose that compliant action. And these are generalized statements. It doesn't apply to all vessel operators, but this is how we can understand the problem and assess our policy options and solutions. So, in the development of a legally binding instrument, we need to be conscious that we might be inadvertently incentivizing behaviors we don't want. Are the costs of compliance too high? Are we designing something where the probability of detecting non-compliance is too low, or the penalties are too low? And we also need to understand that if we require something where the cost of compliance is very high, we will need to balance that by making penalties or other incentives high enough to overcome that. So we can look at this problem from a decision maker's trade-off. This is where the decision maker is choosing whether to comply with rules or avoid them, and potentially for a significant cost saving. And decision makers will compare the costs and benefits of compliance with those for non-compliance. I'm not going to go into any kind of mathematics lesson here at all, but to understand that when thinking about a compliant action, there is the cost of compliance with that intervention or the action required. And on the other side, there's an amount gained from avoidance. And we have to then deduct from that the probability of them being detected that they've chosen that non-compliant behaviour and multiplying that by the penalty that applies. I've put two just brief examples here to show that one of them might be cleaning with capture and not. The cost of cleaning with capture every time might be very high, and cleaning without capture, the benefits of that might be high or very high, and the probability of detecting that that was done might be quite low, and the penalties in some cases might be extremely low or very low. And in this situation, we have something that is not incentive compatible, where the vessel operator or maybe the cleaning provider, wherever it is, might choose to go to locations or do things that do not involve capture. The second one is a biofouling management plan. The cost of compliance of having an effective biofouling management plan might be very low. And having no biofouling management plan has little benefit in terms of avoidance. The probability of detecting that would be very high, and the penalties might be low. In this case, it might not matter as much, because you can see that, and this is probably evidenced by how many vessels do have management plans, that compliant action is one that is more easily chosen. There is the trade-off is easier to understand. I'm going to very quickly, because I have run out of time, briefly talk about two problems which have been touched on by Bev and Mark. One is a hidden information problem. This is something that means without information, without that situation awareness, we can't design things that are incentive compatible. It doesn't work. These decisions made by vessel operators, they have 100% of the information and what they consider when they're making that decision. As a regulator, I've put 10% up there, but it might be 1, and it might be less. And sometimes that information isn't even accurate. So we need to make sure that we design systems that truthfully reveal that information. The other one is imperfect measurement. So this occurs when our ability to measure, it occurs in biofouling management, when our ability to measure compliance is flawed. And this is something that Bev touched on a little bit too. But I've just put an example here where the measurement might be a biofouling management plan or vessel monitoring, which suggests that it is consistent with the policy, that everything is being done appropriate. But and I'm sorry, I think I made a mistake here, but the behaviour is inconsistent with the policy here. When you actually inspect the niche area, it is found. So there's some indication here that maybe a biofouling management plan or vessel monitoring system is a good indicator of proactive management, but perhaps an imperfect measure of the actual biofouling risk. So I've just touched on these. There is a plethora of information and expertise needed to understand this field, which I know a very small amount of. So I want to acknowledge and thank these people who help inform us in our development, and also want to thank you for listening and giving me the opportunity to be here and talk to all of you and hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilkinson, for sharing how the Australian government is doing. And now we will move on to the second presentation. Mr. Colin Hanane, Director of Marine Protection Environment Policy at Transport Canada, will give us a presentation on Share Canada's national regulation policy and experience. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Annyeonghaseyo, and thank you very much for the lovely invitation to come and present to you. today, and extending that both to the ministry colleagues and also to the Secretariat, who provided excellent support to speakers in getting us here. I think I have a lot to say, so I'm going to jump right in with little preamble and just start by talking about why biofouling matters to Canada. We know that it's essential for protecting biodiversity. We know, I mentioned yesterday, the costs are high, about $423 billion annually for aquatic invasive species, a significant proportion attributed to marine invasions, and up to 70% of aquatic invasive species are linked to biofouling, and we've seen an increase in introductions of 37% since 1970. So it's a huge problem. I mentioned yesterday as well, and so I won't dwell on it, the important co-benefits for climate and for underwater radiated noise, which are both very important issues for us in Canada. We know that having a clean hull reduces drag and lowers the fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, as well as operating costs. But underwater noise is also a huge issue, and so it's a good thing to be able to address multiple issues with the same intervention. And the third reason is kind of a why now, because we know that there will be fleet renewal, and this is a good moment when we have a lot of innovation happening in this space, and it means that we have a lot of opportunities for action. In terms of what we have been working on in Canada, we developed some voluntary guidance for ships and ports with respect to in-water cleaning. We don't have mandatory requirements for either arriving vessels or for in-water cleaning in Canada. We ask ships to develop a biofouling management plan, have a good anti-fouling system, and keep records. Some of our ports do have jurisdiction to make cleaning decisions within their waters, and so that is taking place in some areas. The second piece that we're really focused on is risk assessment on biofouling and in-water cleaning. So we're quite far advanced in our risk assessments on sampling fouled ships and codings to determine risks to various areas in Canada. But we're less advanced in our work on assessing the risk of in-water cleaning. And when I say assessing the risk, it's very much from a practical perspective of wanting to be able to identify where in Canada are the lowest risk areas for cleaning and what are the lowest risk situations with respect to the vessel that we might pursue in a later mandatory conversation. Finally, we're involved in innovation work to support clean shipping. And this involves working with in-water cleaning companies to pilot technologies and work towards ecosystem protection, and also inform our policy development. I'm not going to repeat too much about what was said at IMO, other than to say that in the spirit of digitalization, I used a bunch of AI tools to prepare some nice clip art for you. But we know we have done the biofouling guidelines. We've done the guidance on in-water cleaning. And we're looking now at the legally binding framework, as others have discussed, with a few post-it notes on there on that future set of rules that we want to be looking at the release of hazardous materials and microplastics. And we want to look at the connections to air pollution, greenhouse gas, and noise. So what is it that we want to be working on in a legally binding framework on biofouling? We have a number of open questions, and those have already begun to be explored by some of the speakers that we've had already here this morning. But we know that we have outstanding questions about making sure that we have clean niche areas. And Peter was talking about incentivizing behaviors and the costs of some of the parts of the regime that may be a little bit more difficult, let's say, for industry. We know that a lot of the savings are going to come from cleaning the hull. But a lot of the invasive species risks come from the niche areas. And so how are we going to create a regime that actually achieves not just the things that are cost effective, but are actually going to require some investment in terms of environmental protection? And how clean is clean? We need standards that are going to be workable and protective, and that are going to allow ships to be able to know how clean they are, and are going to allow port states to also recognize how clean they are or are not. And part of that is then going to be what is going to be effective in terms of monitoring the extent of that biofouling on the ship. What is the condition of the hull, and what are the niche areas? And in terms of cleaning standards, once again, after we clean a vessel, how clean should that vessel be? But also, in the case of cleaning with capture, what should the effluent of that system look like? And are we simply moving the invasive species and the coating substances from the vessel into the water indirectly through the cleaning system? And how is that going to work in practice? Because it's one thing to do this when you have highly trained operators and you have very controlled conditions. But what is this going to look like when we replicate this around the world and we have large numbers of operators that are doing this work? So how are we going to be able to assess that in practice? And what is the regime that we're going to use for oversight to make sure that even equipment that is well designed is properly operated in terms of what will find its way into the water? And that brings up then the question of how will we certify these cleaning services? And what will the number of those cleaning services be? And where will they be distributed around the world? And in terms of coding compatibility, this is a crucial issue, and we haven't done that much talking about it so far this morning. But certainly there's a lot of concern about ships showing up for cleaning and then leaving with damaged coatings, and the implication that that has for actually protecting biofouling in the long run. Because if this anti-fouling coating is supposed to be protecting the vessel from biofouling, and then we have a cleaning activity that removes that coating, then we actually are not solving the problem of biofouling, and the problem is going to be a lot worse in the future. So from that perspective, there's a lot to talk about. So I'm not going to explain this entire table to you, but I've put it onto the screen as an example of what we have to work with at the IMO and in our typical international conventions in terms of opportunities to influence the system. And we may look at this, and some of you may be familiar with a protocol called HACCP, which stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. It's used in the food industry. It actually didn't originate in the food industry. This Critical Control Points framework is a concept that arose from engineering in the past. But essentially, a control point is a point at which we can influence behavior. We can mandate an action, we can verify compliance, we can build confidence in the outcomes of a system. And this kind of framework can help us to design an instrument in a holistic way, where we make the minimum number of interventions at the most critical control points in order to achieve an outcome that we're looking for. And I've just put this up here just as an example. So we may have, I think I can actually use this. We may have up here a couple of topics. So perhaps we want to ensure that we have clean niche areas, or perhaps that we want to ensure we have safe in-water cleaning. So then what are the regulatory actions that we might take in that regard? So for clean niche areas, we can intervene at a number of different points. We can intervene at the point of designing the ship, biofouling management planning, operations, record keeping, surveys, port state control. These are all the moments that perhaps we could use to regulate the ship, and there may be more. And then we also may have some control points around the equipment. So what are the standards that we want to follow? How should the approval work? What should we do in terms of the service provider? And should we be approving individual ship cleanings? So when we're talking about clean niche areas, there may be actions to take all the way along, and we should be able to tell a story that we have guidelines on how to develop the ship, design, perhaps that's a voluntary guidance, but then we're going to have mandatory elements about a biofouling management plan that focus on niche areas. We'll inspect regularly during ship operations. We keep records of that can be checked during surveys, and at Port State Control, we're checking the certificate and all of the documentation. When it comes to the cleaning side of things, again, it may not be all the same control points, but again, we need to define, okay, well, perhaps the vessel has something to do in terms of selecting its coatings and determining what are the best practices for cleaning. And then for the equipment standard as well, we would see a number of different control points. So by doing this, we can lay out the instrument we want and know exactly what it is that we're going to get if we design it holistically. So in terms of creating a framework, what are some ideas or recipes that we should be bearing in mind as we do this? The first is perhaps clarify what is it that we are actually trying to do with this instrument. And we've had a lot of discussion here today about various different questions that are open. What are the important questions? What is the problem that we're actually trying to solve? At that point, we need to have some real dialogue on what are the real problems and seeking true consensus. And I think we have seen in the past in some of the discussions at the IMO, and we are, many of us, alumni of the Ballast Water Convention, how we were able to agree on text, but we didn't always agree on the concepts. And that has caused problems for us sometimes down the road. We need to focus on the practical approaches, and in that respect, really consider where we are deploying aspiration and be quite cautious about that. There are times where we do need aspirational requirements to stimulate technology development, for example, but we need to be very careful that we don't paint ourselves into a corner where we've frozen an instrument in time and we don't know how to get around some of these aspirational elements. We need to ensure that there's a level playing field when we have costs for the industry. There may be additional costs associated with biofouling management, but it's very important that the industry fairly bear those costs, and then it's a lot easier for the industry to accept if all competitors are having to bear the same expenses. It'll be crucial to have thoughtful conditions for entry into force of this convention. And you know, the typical entry into force provisions relate to having a number of flag states sign on to ensure that the industry is comfortable and prepared and ready to move forward. There may be a need to think about some other entry into force conditions like the global distribution of in-water cleaning facility availability, so that we can be sure that when the instrument enters into force, we will have those pieces in place, but as well, we can give the industry and flag states the confidence to sign on, knowing that those conditions will be met before they begin to apply to ships. And finally, we should solve some of these issues before we get too far into drafting text. So often we can wind up in a room designing the text of a legal instrument, and we haven't even really sorted out what the main issues are. And when you have 130 countries talking about this text in the room, working on it at the level of commas and periods is not always the best way to develop a holistic instrument. And so that's where an approach like defining our control points may be helpful. So with that, and in the hopes of leaving as much time as possible for our discussion at the end, I'll stop there, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanain. Thank you. And now we are going to take a short break of 15 minutes, please return to this Topaz Hall and be seated by 11:10. Coffee and cookies are available in the lobby, where you can also visit exhibition booth of Task Global and SLM, manufacturers of remotely operated underwater vehicles. We invite you to relax and take a look around during the break. And after the coffee break, we will continue with the session 3 and followed by the panel discussion. Finally, after the panel discussion, as I mentioned, Lucky Draw event will be held during the closing ceremony. So if you haven't submitted your business card yet, please put it in the collection box at the registration desk. And don't forget to stay with us until the end of the closing ceremony. Thank you. Research Institute of Ships and Ocean Engineering will deliver a presentation on autonomous in-water hull cleaning technology for biofouling removal, overview, and future directions. Please welcome him. Ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly ask to take your seats as we are continue with the session 3, so please be seated. Thank you. So now let us continue with session 3, which will focus on current status and prospects in Korea. For the first presentation of this session, Mr. Dae-gil Park, senior researcher at the Korea Research Institute of Ships and Ocean Engineering, will deliver a presentation on autonomous in-water hull cleaning technology for biofouling removal, overview, and future directions. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dae-gil Park, and I'm come from Korea Research Institute of Ship and Ocean Engineering. So today I will briefly talk about the autonomous in-water hull cleaning technology for biofouling removals as a technology aspect. So today's presentation will be given in these orders. And so introduction. So as you know, the biofouling means the build-up of the marine life on the submerged part of the ship, such as barnacles, sea scales, seaweed, and so on. And they bring about several problems, such as disturb the ecosystem and fuel efficiency decrease and personal accident during the biofouling cleaning tasks. So IMO and MEPC define biofouling as some main cause of the hull resistance and ecosystem disturbance. So we conduct some hull cleaning. So when we consider about the hull cleaning, we can choose the dry dock cleaning and in-water cleaning. So dry dock cleaning means the lift out the ship from the waters, and they allow the full inspection and repairing and cleaning. So this system consumes a lot of the time, so about a week to the month, and also it needs high cost. It consumes the expensive because of the dock fee and loss of the operation. On the other hand, in-order cleaning means perform the cleaning in underwater, so it saved a lot of time and money. So this system is good for the ship owners, but it is have limitation about the spread of the biofouling residues. So we just consider about the in-order cleaning. So in-order cleaning can be classified as a diver-based cleaning and robotic cleaning. Diver-based cleaning is effective for the complex and compliant areas, and also it can clean the niche area. However, it always have some possibility about the safety risk due to the depth, press, and visibilities. And also, diver-based cleaning cannot guarantee the quality, so the performance of this by diver-based, sorry. So it is depending on the diver scale and condition. The robotic cleanings, it had limitation about the limited performance in each area. However, it is good for it guarantees the safe operation in hazard underwater environment, and also it guarantees the uniform cleaning performance over the red areas. So in Korea, because of the diver safety and traceability, the robotic cleaning system getting attention. So next, I will briefly talk about the robotic approaches for in-order cleaning. So first one is a diver assistance system. So first, the diver-driven hull cleaning cart means the diver driving the robotic cart and moves toward and they cleaning the hull like that. But it also still have some potential safe risk from the regulator host entanglement during the operation. And the diver assistance system also suggests some diver monitoring and diver support system. So this system supplies the monitoring of diver's position, air supply, and vital sign. So, but it also some limitation in the in structured environments such as hull cleaning site. So in near futures, diver assist system maybe guarantee and supply the more precise monitoring and control system for cleaning the minimize diver fatigue, improve the work efficiency, and prevent accident. So this is some kind of diagram. So the robotic cart move autonomously or semi-autonomously, and diver can check the diver's position and robot path and overall some cleaning procedure. And also the supervisor can see this overall condition, and this data is saved and managed in the database system like that. Next one is the wheel-driven hull cleaning robot. So this robot replaced the divers for the hull cleaning. So this is some kind of is a Korean company for this wheel-driven hull cleaning robot. But so this system can give some option for the debris collection depending on the optional requirement like that. But it still have some limitation for the rich area. So in the near futures, this system will be overcome the niche areas limitation using some kind of robotic approach. So we think about this core technology. So robot can control and can measure about some overall system using the sensors fusion on the water, and this wheel-driven hull cleaning robot will be attached to the robot arm to reach, to access and clean the niche area. And also, if you use the remote control, a haptic feedback system is attached on this system, and they can, the operator check the condition of the hull cleaning using some and effect posts and tactiles of this system. And post control system also apply in this robot to ensuring the stable cleaning performance on the current and collisions. Final one is floating hull cleaning robot. So this system is used floating ROVs like that, and this system is non-contact system, or using the rotor jet, or sometimes they use some brush like that. However, this system has limitation for the strong current or high wave because they can hard to overcome some current or some interaction between the robot and ship. And also it has the challenging problem to capturing the biofouling residues. So this system also, we are think about this system can you apply the robotic approach like to operate in strong disturbance such as wave and current. So we consider some kind of whole body control about the body. So whenever they can predict about the strong current or interaction, and then they will make the control input to overcome this disturbance like that. And also they need some kind of the robotic arm to attach it and access the niche area, or some covered shape. And also we are just main challenging problem is how to gathering or collecting the some biofouling residues. So this is conclusion. So in this the many inert cleaning needs some is getting attended to overcome the because of its advantages such as reduced docking time and cleaning cost, and robotic cleaning system expand to the will be spread because it can improve the diver safety and ensure the consistent cleaning qualities. So we think about that the autonomous robotic cleaning system will be help this replace the diver-based cleaning system, and also I think some floating robot and manufacturer-based field-driven system will be become some common technology in this niche area cleaning system. So thank you for attention, and if you have any question, please ask to me after this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Park. Thank you for introducing the autonomous hull cleaning technology. Thank you. And we will move on to the second presentation. Mr. Kyung-soon Shin, Principal Research Scientist at the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology, is going to give us a presentation on application of environmental risk assessment for in-water cleaning of ships' hull fouling. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. I'm Kyung-soon Shin from Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology. I would like to present the result of a field application to the risk assessment of substances generated during the inert cleaning of ships' hull biofouling. This video was taken using an underwater ROV from ship anchored in Busan port. As you can see, there are many organic substances attached to the hull, many of which appear to be barnacles. It's well known that biofouling has negative effects on the aquatic environment and the economy. In the first in-water cleaning involved divers entering the water and performing the hull cleaning. As shown in the image on the right, future hull cleaning will be performed remotely using in-water cleaning equipment without the need for divers. The two videos show in-water cleaning equipment developed in Korea. Even after removing fouling from the hull using in-water cleaning equipment and suction it for post-treatment, living organisms and chemicals were found in the cleaning byproduct released during the suction process and in the water discharged from the post-treatment device. For the risk assessment of in-water cleaning byproduct, we designed two methods, biological risk and chemical risk. Due to time constraints, I will only present the result for biological risk assessment. This slide is an overview of the biological risk assessment procedure. Based on the precedent study conducted in New Zealand, the biological risk assessment protocol was developed considering domestic condition and the current level of technological advancement. The biological risk assessment was based on KIMEA experimental results and expert advice from marine biologists and numerical modeling results. The development of a biological risk assessment method for in-water hull cleaning was conducted in three main stages. First, 6 core factors were selected. Second, based on these factors, 160 in-water cleaning scenarios were developed using a matrix approach. Third, considering all possible pathways for the introduction of biofouling organisms from vessel arrival through the cleaning process to departure. 4 assessment indices were developed, R1, R2, R3, and R4. Using the KIME indices, the risk priority number for each cleaning scenario was calculated. This slide illustrates the research procedure for establishing scientific evidence to support the biological risk evaluation index. The image on the left shows the experiment design for KIMEA, R1 and R3, and R2 and R4. For the R1 and R3 experiment, as shown in the center image, anti-fouling coated settlement plates were installed and continuously monitored at the Kiosk Research Pier. For the R2 and R4 experiment samples of implant, when each plate reached a designed fouling level, it was retrieved and transferred to the laboratory to examine the rigorous potential of attached organism over a 21 days period. For the R2 and R4 experiments, samples of implant captured, uncaptured effluent, and treated water were collected from vessel arriving in domestic ports using an in-water cleaning equipment. The samples were transferred to the laboratory, diluted to concentration of 1, 2, 5, and 10%, and analyzed to evaluate the rigorous potential of biofouling organisms under controlled laboratory condition. The first field performance test was conducted on August 15, 2024 at container vessel. The degree of fouling on the hull surface was assessed on level 3. algae covered 70% of the surface, and the macrofouling organisms were also seen sporadically. In the evaluation of the capture efficiency of in-water cleaning equipment, rigorous of 4 major organism groups was observed in captured water samples. In particular, macroalgae shows faster growth in the uncaptured seawater than the experimental condition, assuming 90% capture efficiency. This suggests that the capture efficiency in water cleaning equipment at fouling level 3 is likely to be below 90%. Organic matter life and death identification was performed to evaluate the treatment efficiency of the byproduct captured during the in-water cleaning. Low living organisms were found larger than 50 micrometer in size. Heterotrophic bacteria was found to be 90% removed. For organisms 10 to 50 micrometer in size, the FDA, CMFDA staining method and ATP assay showed removal efficiency of 68.9% and 42.4% respectively. In addition, the ambient test confirmed rigorous in both influent and treated water, suggesting a high potential for rigorous of microalgae even after passing through the post-treatment system. The following table and summarize the biological risk assessment result from the first field performance test. Based on the information table, the biological risk assessment result shows that when no capture and post-treatment were applied, the risk priority number was 934, which falls within the medium risk range, but represents a relatively high level of concern. When a capture efficiency of 90 to 99% was assumed, the RPN decreased to 96, classified as a low risk level. However, during the field performance test, the presence of living organisms detected in both the capture and treated water suggests that the actual biological risk may be higher than the calculation value. The second field performance test was conducted on October 10, 2024, using RV vessel. The degree of fouling on the hull surface was assessed on level 1. Most of the hull surface was covered in slime. The survey and experiment were conducted identically to the first field performance test. In the evaluation of the capture efficiency of in-water cleaning equipment, rigorous was observed in all organism groups of the captured water samples except the macroinvertebrate. Other results were similar to those of the first field performance test. Based on the information table, the biological risk assessment result shows that when no capture and post-treatment was applied, the risk priority number was 160, which falls within the medium risk range, but represents a relatively low level of concern. When a capture efficiency of 90 to 99% was observed, the risk priority number decreased to 20, classified as a low risk level. However, as growth was observed in the uncaptured treated water, similar to the first trial, the actual biological risk may be higher than the calculated value. This is a summary. In field tests conducted on vessel 1 and 2, rigorous of various organism group was observed in experimental group of uncaptured effluent diluted captured water and treated water. The capture and post-treatment device efficiency of the inert cleaning system appears to need improvement. The capture efficiency of the inert cleaning system may be less than 90%. And the inert cleaning scenario was revised to account this. Repeated survival and regrowth of organisms were observed in the treated water from the cleaning byproducts. The inert cleaning scenarios was modified to reflect the performance of the post-treatment device in detail. Taking into account the issues identified in these field application studies, the number of inert cleaning scenarios increased from 160 to 448. The graph on the right shows the change in risk level when applying the improved inert cleaning scenario. In particular, the risk level, which was medium and low in the first field of survey, changed to high when applying the improved inert cleaning scenario. This change is due to the more detailed capture rate of cleaning byproducts and the treatment efficiency of the captured water. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shin. Thank you for the informative presentation. And next, please welcome Mr. Ji Man-seo, Deputy Director at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, who will deliver the final presentation on Korea's strategies, implementation plans, and international cooperation. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to online participants. We must not forget about the online participants. They are still here. So it's my pleasure to give a presentation about Korea policies and future outlook. So before start my presentation today, I would like to share a simple mnemonic that help you to remember my name. So there are many different superheroes in the world. As you can imagine that Superman, Batman, Iron Man, even Wonder Woman. You can picture letter G on my head, and I'm a man, so G-Man. Though I'm not strong as this superhero. So today, let me start my presentations. So my presentation is organized around 4 key pillars. The first one is the Korea's research and development. And the second is about the regulatory frameworks. And the third is collaboration with stakeholders. The last slide is about the future outlook on a future legally binding framework development. Let me start with the research and development. As already our previous speaker mentioned and introduced about new technology, the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries is currently supporting a $24 million USD project to create advanced technology for managing ship biofouling. One of the main focus is the development of ROV, which are able to remove up to 90% of biofouling within 60 hours on vessel up to 300 meters in length. Our goal, and in addition to the technology development, we also support research on the environmental risk related to the biofouling. It was already well presented by my previous speakers, so I'm going to skip this one. So next, as already mentioned by our previous speakers, Corinne and also Peter, we are trying to develop national requirement for ship biofouling requirement. This includes guidelines for the installations, maintenance, and approval of the in-water cleaning system. In this respect, we will launch a dedicated project team, and the requirements are being developed through consultation with a wide range of stakeholders. As you can find here that the seats are already well occupied, and I was a bit surprised, but it means that the biofouling is one of the hottest topic in Korea. That is why my colleagues and all my friends are here to get here. So our approach about the national requirement is the step-by-step. First, we begin with voluntary guidelines. Then, gradually move toward mandatory requirement. On the international front, our ministry plans to submit a proposal to PPI 13. It is scheduled to February next year. This proposal will raise key questions such as whether to develop a new standalone conventions or to amend existing conventions such as ballast water management convention. We will also share our national experience to help ensure that the future regulations are practical and achievable and grounded in science. Of course, regulation and technology are important, but information sharing and stakeholders collaboration are just as crucial. To support this, the Korean government has hosted a series of national and international workshops and forums to promote open exchange. So the first international forum is part of that effort. It offers a platform to share technologies, policies, best practice, and lessons learned, while also helping to explore the future direction of the development of the mandatory biofouling management requirement. Looking ahead to the start of discussion at PPI 13, I'd like to share Korea's perspective on developing a legally binding framework. There are two key areas we believe must be addressed. As I already mentioned briefly, the first one is the type of the legal instrument we aim to develop. One option is to create a new standalone convention dedicated to the ship's biofouling management. The other is to amend existing instruments such as ballast water management convention to include biofouling provisions in there. Both approaches have their own advantages and challenges, and we look forward to provide our analysis to contribute to this important initial discussion at global level. Second, there are a number of key provisions that still need to be reviewed to ensure the framework is practical and workable. These include the availability and readiness of the in-water cleaning technology, and also development of the standard for capture, removal, and post-treatment of biofouling residue, and the importance of the scientific data and risk assessment to support environmentally sound practice. Through this effort, we believe that we can help shape a science-based, effective, and implementable international framework. That concludes my presentation, but it leaves us with the important questions. What step should we take now to develop a legally binding framework for managing ship biofouling? Rather than answering this alone, I will now hand over the microphone to the panel discussion, especially our moderator of the Korean Hane. He is ready to lead our following panel discussion. Together, we will explore diverse perspectives and discuss the way forward. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seo, for sharing the current status and future outlook of Korea. Well, we extend our sincere appreciation to the three speakers for enriching session 3 with their valuable insights. Through 3 sessions, we have gained a clear understanding of why biofouling management is both necessary and urgent, how other countries are approaching with this issue, and in what direction Korea can move forward to secure an international advantage in this field. With that foundation now laid, we will move on to the panel discussion as the stage gets ready. So we will continue with the dialogue, deepening the conversation, challenging assumptions, and exploring what practical steps may follow from the insights we have heard today. As our theme of today's forum suggests shaping the future, developing a legally binding framework, the conversations we'll have today are not theoretical, and they are concrete steps toward international action for environmentally responsible maritime practice. And now we are getting ready for the panel discussion. I guess our stage is ready for the panel discussion. So we would like to invite the moderator, Mr. Colin Hanane, Director at Transport Canada, and 5 panelists to take their seats at the table on stage. Please welcome them with a big round of applause.
This is the mic for you. Yes. And yeah. Yes. And we need to share the microphone. Yes.
Okay, so good morning again, and thank you for your attention already so far this morning. We're just a little bit behind schedule. I understand we can have a little bit of flexibility at the end, but we need to respect as well that people will need to have lunch. And so I'm not going to make a long opening remark in the interests of time here, because we just had a very nice introduction to the forum, or the panel. So what I propose to do is really take it in 3 parts. The first is I have a question for each panelist. And the second is I have some open questions that the panelists may wish to discuss. And the third is that if we have time at the end, we'll save a little bit of time for questions, either from those in the room, or I believe we have a few folks also listening in online. So we'll save a little bit of time for that if we can. And but before getting started, I'd like to just briefly introduce our panelist who has not already given a presentation, and this is Dr. Sujin Park of the Korea Maritime Institute, who has a deep experience in negotiation of several marine international instruments and conventions. Dr. Park, would you like to give a little bit of an introduction of yourself, just so we can get to know you here at the start of the panel?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'm very pleased to be participating as a panelist in this meaningful international forum on GF's biofouling management at the 2025 Korea Maritime Week. I am Sujin Park, director at the Korea Maritime Institute. I've been conducting several research about relevant marine environmental policies and legal systems, including biofouling management and international regimes. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, Dr. Park. So maybe I'll give the first question then to you. Most of us are familiar with a number of different conventions on protection of the marine environment. We have the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, and we have the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, fondly known as BBNJ. What do you see as the linkage between our work in developing a legally binding framework on biofouling and these broader conventions? And are there any lessons we can learn from those other international instruments?
Yes. First of all, I wish to stress on the relevance of the BBNJ agreement, which met the entry into first requirement last September with the ratification as the 7th country to biofouling. The BBNJ agreement is scheduled to enter into the next January. Will bring about a shift from the principle of freedom of the high seas under the UNCLOS. In short, it's expected to transform the international regulatory framework for the conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity in the high seas in the deep sea bed. Therefore, an international agreement for the control and management biofouling requires consistency and cooperation with the BBNG agreement. And I also stressed on CBD and MAPR Annex and the IOC and UNESCO IOC's relevant programs. The ships biofouling relate to various international instruments concerning the conservation, sustainable use of marine environment and marine ecosystems. For example, Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework under the CBD, particularly the global goal is reducing the introduction rate of alien species by 50% by 2030. Furthermore, they must harmonize with the plastic pellet regulations under the MAPR Annex 5 discussion on invasive species by IUCN, UNESCO IOC's relevant programs, and the UN Plastic Treaty. Finally, the common feature of a BBNJ agreement and the UN Plastic Treaty negotiation is their focus on financing and financial mechanism for implementation of the international regulations. Future discussions on the international instrument for managing ships biofouling should also address the design of sustainable financial mechanisms to support capacity building in the developing countries and international industry adoption and participations. Thank you.
Thanks very much. The next question is for G-Man. And I had come up with exactly the same way to remember your name as you suggested in the presentation, so thank you for that. Okay, so currently we have limited experience and data available from the implementation of the voluntary IMO instruments on this, notably the guidelines, the biofouling guidelines. Given the need for practical experience, and we heard a bit from Mark on this earlier in the presentations as well, scientific evidence, insights into the challenges of implementation, what should we be taking in terms of steps to inform and support the development of a legally binding framework?
Thank you. I happy to hear that my mnemonic is work very well. So before start my intervention, I would like to take my little home advantage. If you allow me, I'm going to speak in Korean in order to my Korean guests heard my very lovely Korean accent, and also my intervention must be very clear, so I don't want to make any misunderstand from my intervention. So let me start with Korean. So 강제력이 있는
Before developing legally binding framework, the most important principle is to develop science-based effective regulation. But we are lack of science-based data, and through the implementation of voluntary guideline of IMO, we have not accumulated sufficient experience. So we have to ask ourselves this question: the compulsory guideline of the IMO, was it effective for eliminating biofouling? And in terms of technology and in terms of operation of the voluntary guideline, what kind of issues were there? We need to identify those issues. And when IMO develops policies, they take three-step approach. I would like to propose that we apply this three-step approach. First of all, we collect data and analyze the collected data. And thirdly, the collected and analyzed data must be reflected in the actual regulation. This is a very scientific approach. First of all, we have to identify what kind of data we have to collect. For example, when it comes to in-water cleaning robot or ROV, we have to consider the technological capabilities. We have to figure out if we use the current technologies, can we really meet the standard for biofouling management? So we have to begin with the question whether the current technologies are good enough to meet the standard or criteria for biofouling management, especially when it comes to niche area or bending area. We need to consider the use of robots. And secondly, we have to set a specific plan for data collection and analysis. So we don't have enough time. We have very tight schedule. By 2029, we have to develop effective and practical framework by setting a specific timeline. And last but not least, if we have specific timeline and plans in place, we need to establish a system for information sharing among diverse stakeholders. For example, we can use the platform of the IMO so that we can collect data from stakeholders and share feedbacks with each other. And then it will be helpful for us to discuss implementation of the mandatory regulation in the future. It's also important to engage the stakeholders in this process. Based on the IMO's three-step approach, we will apply the same approach and submit our proposal to the IMO meeting.
That was very helpful. Peter, I'd like to essentially put the same question to you. What's your perspective on data gaps and what should we be bearing in mind as we develop a legally binding framework?
Firstly, I could answer my question by saying just what G-Man said, because it does really reflect a lot of the sort of the needs that we have and also the recognition that we need to give to maybe technology development that is out there now, information that we have, I'll say we in the collective sense, but maybe not we in terms of in front of us. So what stands out here also is a comment you made, Colin, in your presentation about not jumping into text. And I think that's something that G-Man really highlighted as well, is the need to make sure that we gather this experience and data so that it can inform every step of the process that we're going to go through together. And so I think, yes, part of that is really formally inviting submissions to the IMO on aspects of information that we need. I mean, the BRAD project that was talked about and is another example of that, clearly defining some of the questions we need answers to. And I think that there's probably a wider range of inputs on some of these topics, research going on. I mean, even just being here today, I've learned more about what's happening. So I think that formal invitation is important. And through that, we may actually realize that there is a lot of experience out there. Maybe not enough in particular areas that we need to focus on. And one of those might be sort of aspects around the guidelines. From my perspective, I don't really have a great understanding of how valuable they are to ship owners and operators. Which aspects of the plans of management plans do they look at regularly, or which aspects of the guidelines have really informed and changed their management of biofouling? And then as a flow into that is, as a result of that, what markets are there now for new technology? Where are we seeing investments in technology that suggest to us that there is those incentives for technology development, and that's something that we need to leverage off rather than stifle, something we need to be really careful of. So I think it is a large part of ensuring that the data and information we gather is broad, but also being aware that when we do get that information, we need to piece it all together and look at it holistically. But I like the way that you broke down in your presentation the components to be able to insert them into different areas and realize that there's experts on each aspect, not all of it necessarily together. So, thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Mark, you touched on this in your presentation, and we've been talking about data gaps, and your presentation really did a good job of covering many of those data gaps. But one of the things you mentioned was learning the lessons from our work on ballast water. And I'm conscious of the fact that you spend a large proportion of your time working on both ballast water and biofouling. So you have a unique perspective about the realities. What are some lessons we should learn from the rollout of ballast water technology, and what should we be thinking about from an equipment perspective as we move into a legally binding framework?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. And not only my work at the IMO in ballast water and biofouling, but also my entire career has been centered in this. And I was a licensed engineer. I was a class surveyor for 15 years. Also a ship manager, a fleet manager, and then an equipment manufacturer. So I've been in the maritime space for 30 years, and I've been in really every aspect of it. And so it does give a rather unique perspective. And one of I think to me, the biggest lesson we need to learn from ballast water is to start with making compliance verification easy. We have to figure out a way to undo the challenge that Port State and Flag Administration surveyors have with verifying compliance. Because I think, one of the things that was in Peter's slide that I just loved, and I actually took a picture of it, was that game theory. And if your chance of being caught is low, no matter what the penalty is, the incentives dive. I mean, they just drop off a cliff. And so that's a huge thing that we need to take and we need to move forward with. The other thing another thing I think that's really important is not to have a really protracted implementation and ratification process. That was a huge aspect in ballast water. With the Ballast Water Convention came out in 2004, and it wasn't until 2016 until we actually achieved ratification. That's very difficult for core businesses that have innovated and have created and are at the leading forefront of technology to stay in business and to stay relevant. And instead, it allowed a lot of other companies to kind of come in and catch up, and it really created a lot of problems. And really, a lot of those problems go around another thing that I want to talk about, which is testing. Right now, we have an ISO procedure for testing. It's an in-water testing procedure, and I think we need to be looking at both using the ballast water model, take an advantage here, and look at the land-based and shipboard testing models, and look at how do we do laboratory testing of equipment to verify, and then move that into the field. I really hope we don't use the word type approval actually in this. I don't think there's a need to type approve cleaning systems. I think there's a need to verify their performance so that an administration knows whether they want to be used in their waters or not. But I don't think type approval is the right idea for this process. And lastly, and I know I saved this till last, it was actually higher on my list, but after G-Man and Peter talked about this, I'm really happy that right now I see engagement with industry, and I see engagement with industry as a partner. That was a big aspect in ballast water, that industry was behind a veil. And what is often not understood is how powerful competitive advantage is. And industry wants good standards. So it's really important for us to do that and to give them that opportunity, because industry will want to be able to meet a high standard for that competitive advantage. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And so maybe that's a nice segue if we go then to Bev to talk about what industry wants from a ship owning perspective. I have a selfishly detailed question that I wanted to ask because I actually really want to know the answer about how does a ship owner decide whether to use a ship-mounted system that can travel around the world with the vessel versus a land-based system where they go to port and they purchase a cleaning service. But maybe an interesting broader question as well to add would be, what kinds of information does it take for ship owners to really start to feel comfortable about cleaning more routinely? And what do we need in the legally binding framework to support that kind of sense of comfort from a ship owner with routine cleaning?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I could answer with one word, and that would be cost. But that's maybe not the answer that you're looking for. Cost and necessity is probably the key decision point. So are they cleaning because it's a proactive action, they would want to remove the slime to be more efficient, or are they cleaning because they need to, because something has happened or they're going somewhere they need to? So that will play into the decision. But if I can explore onboard systems first, and being used for hull maintenance rather than niche areas, obviously. I would say that at the moment we're in a trial phase with these. I don't think many of our members are using them as part of their day-to-day operations, although increasingly they will be. I'd also say that there's varying levels of success. We're not getting a lot of feedback that these are working brilliantly and working all the time. And gathering this experience is going to be very important for us and for the development of this instrument. And I think one critical issue that we haven't really talked about is the crew. And every time there is a new instrument or new piece of technology on board a ship, we inadvertently create a problem or an additional burden for our seafarers who are already overworked. And I think we asked in our survey what the existing burden on the crew on biofouling management was, and it was very low. It was about 2 out of 5 for most companies, but anybody who was already doing proactive management raised that to a 3 out of 5. So it's not critical yet, but we mentioned the Ballast Water Convention, and we love a survey. We've just done a ballast water survey, and it's quite an interesting point that, and we'll be submitting this to IMO shortly, is that one of the issues raised with ballast water was that the alarm systems are keeping the crew awake. And when they're doing ballasting operations, the alarms are going off so frequently that the crew are not getting, they're in violation of rest hour, working hour rules, and they're getting fatigued. So there's a safety issue. So we don't think about these things when we're having these discussions. So we really need to be careful that we learn these lessons as we go along. And for the land-based systems, I mean, I mentioned it in my presentation. The reality is they're dropping anchor and using divers. And we need to move away from that because we've heard from the excellent presentation that it's not very safe to use divers, particularly not offshore. But we need to create this capacity for the ships to be able to use land-based cleaning when they need it. I think it's going to be challenging, even from a very basic perspective of you can't do this everywhere. The visibility might not be good enough. The weather might not be good enough. You might be mooring and you can only clean one half of your ship because of the way you're moored. So there's very practical experiences. And I'll give an anecdote. I was very lucky to be invited to a cleaning. I spent a week in a naval base in France, watching a Navy ship being cleaned. And the disruption to the cleaning process was quite frequent. We had to stop for dolphins. That was nice. Very exciting for me. We had to stop because at one point the copper levels were too high in the water, so the operation stopped. At one point the rain got so bad the scientists couldn't go out and take the measurements. And you can't delay a ship for that long in an operational capacity. This was a naval ship. It was going to be in for a long time, so we had the time. But you have to be able to clean and do it without delay. So that is going to be critical. And your final point about what does industry really want is and Mark mentioned type approval, there will be, the ship owner will need assurance if they're investing in these systems that they work. And we do have an issue with ballast systems, that some of them do not work in certain water qualities. And we do need to make sure that the ship owner knows they can clean without damaging the very, very expensive coating that they've purchased, and they can satisfy the administrations that the ship owner can do everything right, but there will still be an issue with failures of technology. So yeah, lots of work to do, I think. Sorry, Colin, that's the conclusion.
Well, it's best to define it in advance, right? Instead of getting all the way down the road and then finding that we haven't done that. Okay, so thank you, speakers, for all of that. So we'll enter into our second phase here now, and I'll move towards open questions that could generate probably different perspectives or interacting ideas here on the panel. And so they're big, broad questions. And the first one is, and so, you know, panelists, please make of these questions what you will. The first question is, how should we incentivize the behaviors that we want to see in the marketplace? I should have identified somebody as a victim to receive the first thing. Let's see, you're picking up your microphone, Peter, so over to you.
I'll pick up my microphone because my presentation had incentives in it, just the word itself. So I think there are incentives that exist all the time. And shipping operators deal with those now. They might be incentivizing the behaviors we want or not. But we need to actually understand what those incentives are. Yes, there's a cost is obviously a clear one, but then understanding the feedback loops that exist are really important well. So if we want to incentivize behaviors, we need to understand when they're being taken into account. Example, which was just talked about before, is like the chance of being caught. I mean, in an ideal world for a regulator, you maybe would have to never get on a vessel. There would just be a green light that you get shown that tells you it is no risk and it's accurate. And that's fantastic. But that's not what happens. And I think the ballast water example maybe is one where you go through a series of layers of inspections. And how certain are you at the earliest one that it's actually, you know, compliant? So the incentive to the feedback that exists is harder to get to. So we want to incentivize behaviors by having, you know, be able to quickly assess things and accurately with precise measurements. And that will enable the feedback loop to exist. We also want to make sure that then looking at the incentives for innovations and technologies. So they, understanding those that exist in the marketplace now are really important so that we don't stifle them. We don't actually try and generate an incentive to solve one problem that actually then inadvertently affects something that the marketplace was already doing. So it's not so saying how we should incentivize, my answer, but really that there is more to just applying an incentive through saying this is a rule, but you have to do this. We need to make sure that we're careful about that process.
Thank you. I think there's also something we haven't discussed, and BIMCO is quite famous for, is there are always commercial solutions. And every time there is a new legal framework, there will be a contractual obligation that will need to be put in place. And we know that the kind of contracts and clauses can be used to allocate the kind of risk and responsibility between the ship owner and the charterer particularly. And we already have experience on this in biofouling, which is helpful. There's a whole fouling clause, and that can clearly assign the financial responsibilities based on, say, the ship being inactive or having a prolonged port stay. And what that does is it encourages these better behaviors to do the proactive maintenance, you know, where the operational decision is is with the charterer, then there are these clauses in place that protect the owner particularly, and this also incentivizes the better coating selections as well. So I think it's important to remember that the industry will do its own thing to help with these incentivizing by putting these commercial solutions in place as well. So the industry is kind of well prepared to just make sure it can react and enact these things when they come in. But we need to prepare early. Another thing we need to prepare early for, of course.
Thanks. Thanks for those comments. G-Man.
일단 재정
First of all, there are financial and technological incentives which are important. However, first of all, we have to think about other marine environment rules related to biofouling, like SOx, NOx related regulations. We need to consider those regulations as well. For example, SOx, the air pollutant, can be removed through scrubber. You have to install scrubber, and if you want to treat the ballast water, you have to install ballast water treatment system. So ship owners think about cost first when it comes to complying with regulation. However, for biofouling, it's not just about complying with the regulation, but about reducing the biofouling problems, and that can also enhance the fuel efficiency. That is also helpful for them. Of course, technical financial incentives should be considered, but for ship owners and vessel operators, first of all, I agree with you that capturing and post-treatment of biofouling is important, so we need to advance the level of technologies, and shipping companies will have to make more investment in the technologies which might need some incentives, but when we develop legally binding framework, it will give clearer signal to the industries. So it requires both the market's voluntary efforts, and I think that issues can be gradually resolved. So I want to emphasize that it's not about whether we need incentives or not, but it is important that we have to think about the possibility or availability of in-water cleaning services and technologies, and we have to be ready for the regulations first without just focusing only on the incentives.
Thanks, G-Man. Thank you. That's great. Sujin, Dr. Park, please.
I'd like to stress on 3 points to promote eco-friendly water cleaning. I also will speak in Korean, which is the most beautiful and scientific language in the world.
Could you use your microphone, please? Regarding ships biofouling, the global community is in the process of creating a new legal framework, a legally binding framework. I heard a lot of presentations and information about it in the morning. I agree to most of the speakers. I'd like to emphasize 3 things. The industrial ecosystem for biofouling is already in place. It already exists. The community, the industry is using divers and ROVs for in-water cleaning. Then, in the process of developing legally binding framework, all stakeholders should cooperate. And we also think about the social acceptance of the legally binding framework, because with the introduction of a new legally binding framework, more stricter regulations and provisions will be introduced, and that will create some financial burdens on the ship owners and ship operators, and that should be accompanied with technological advancement. One country or one ship owner cannot address all the problems or all the challenges before the creation of legally binding framework. So in the process of negotiating the framework, we have to think about how we can ensure the participation of all stakeholders and how all their voices can be heard. So we have to address that first. Secondly, in the process of creating a legally binding international framework, as I mentioned earlier with the BBNG or UNCLOS, we can learn a lesson from that. In the process of creation of the frameworks, the industry and technology were all considered. Ideally, technologies are already there to ensure implementation of the framework, and it is also ideal to make sure that the regulations do not get in the way of do not get in the way of advancing technology. But in the real world, that's not always the case. So we have to think about how to harmonize regulation and new technologies. It is very challenging. Ship owners and the in-water cleaning service providers, they have to consider regulations, but it will be easier for them to implement regulations when the regulations are harmonized. For that to happen, we need transparency in creation of a legally binding framework. We also have to take into account the potential damages to the industry. We should refrain from saying one thing and doing another. So more cooperation is needed between stakeholders.
Much for that. Okay, I'm going to move to our next big question because I think that one was really insightful. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions on that. One of the big questions that has emerged in this space is about ensuring access to cleaning. Because I think we see, and we've been talking about this, both directly and indirectly all morning, is that there's a big benefit to having a clean ship, particularly when we're talking about the hull. But if you're going to regulate that, then where do you expect people to go to clean, and what will those requirements be? So my question is, what is it really going to take to encourage countries to allow in-water cleaning? And what role should the framework that we're developing at IMO play in encouraging countries from that respect? Again, I probably should have identified somebody to be the first speaker on this one, but Peter, you are holding. Thank you, Peter.
This is a difficult question. The answers are not simple, in part because in-water cleaning as a process touches on many different risks. We're going beyond the the invasive species risk to talk about chemical contaminations and I think, and safety, other things as well. An aspect of in-water cleaning that is challenging and if we wanted to encourage in-water cleaning in ports, for example, or a land-based system, that we're dealing with existing regulations around, often, that exist for discharges into those locations. And in my experience in marine biosecurity policy, unfortunately, we're looking at trying to shoehorn this biofouling issue into maybe existing regulations or understand how they can apply it, and they don't fit well. So understanding that it is a complex regulatory environment. I mean, particularly I can speak from Australia's experience, there's many layers at a national, at a state level, at a port level authority. So it isn't just, encouraging countries to allow it, it's educating all of these different regulators about what in-water cleaning is, the risks of in-water cleaning, but also what happens if there is no in-water cleaning. And you mentioned where do they go? But that's an issue of saying we're setting up a legally binding framework and we're going to be incentivizing best practice in a way of biofouling management. If best practice involves regular in-water cleaning for a lot of vessels, then we have to recognize that they go hand in hand. So in that sense, agreeing to require this of vessels needs to take on that we understand that they are going to have to do that somewhere. So what can we do? I think that the second part of the role of the framework, I'm not sure. I think it's very difficult to really require countries to allow particular things in their waters. And I'm not an expert in that sense of whether it can be achieved, but I think that's where there might be more pushback. But making clear the need for it and recognizing that there is developments to ensure it is managing the various risks that we want is the way that you will get more engagement from countries and encourage their acceptance of in-water cleaning.
Mark?
Yes, if you don't mind, I think really it comes down to two primary issues. It comes down to having the data to understand what that risk is, and it comes down to having independent, verifiable performance verification for the equipment that conducts the cleaning, or the groups that do the cleaning. Because right now, a lot of these decisions are being made based on incomplete data sets, I believe. And so as we put more data into this process and we understand what the risks are, and how those risks vary based on what the risk of not cleaning is. And then when we take a look at what is technologically capable and what's technologically achievable, and how do we verify that independent of the company, I think then we can start breaking down some of those barriers, and I think that's going to be a good way forward.
Anyone else on this topic? Yeah, G-Man.
Let me make my answer brief. The regulation should give a clear signal to the industries. When we begin developing the regulation, we need some momentum or trigger through the discussion on framework development. We will have an international global goal of protecting marine environment through efforts from various member countries. And in this process, there are many stakeholders here, including shipping companies, researchers, and government. All stakeholders will have to pay more attention to this aspect and join this journey of legally binding framework development. As we mentioned today, there are clearly technical barriers and operational challenges we have to overcome. But it's important that we all join our hands together to develop a practical and effective legally binding framework. And as I mentioned before in my presentation, based on the research results and experience we have in Korea, Korea will more actively participate in the process of legally binding framework development.
Okay, so we have about 7 minutes on the clock here. And so unless there's somebody else that would really like to speak to this issue, I'd like to make sure we have time for perhaps a question from the floor, or maybe two, depends on how long it takes, and reserve a little bit of time just to sum up at the end. I know, Sean, you were monitoring online. I'm not sure. Okay, nothing from online, thank you. Do we have a question in the room? Yes, Mo. I guess I should bring you the microphone.
Thank you very much. This has been very insightful, and I'm really proud that we're really talking about a very important subject. Not to complicate things a little bit, but of course we have all kinds of people here that think outside the box. There's a study that shows that almost 58% of microplastics in the oceans right now are due to paints on ships. So how are we are we taken into consideration when it comes to really putting some kind of legally binding framework with in regards to biofiling, but how can we have that balance? Because we're moving into the era of non-biocidal paints and all of that. So how do these balance themselves? Very open question, but thanks, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the question because I think it's really important and at the risk of jumping down an entire rabbit hole, what I'm going to say is this is why it has to be a holistic approach. It's not just about cleaning. This is about how do we maintain vessels? How do we build vessels? How do we maintain vessels? How is the new way to coat vessels based on all of these factors? And just as a very simple example, as I talked about with the ablative coatings, that's part of the reason we're getting all these microplastics. And as we go to a harder coating, we run the risk of more fouling on the ships. But if we're cleaning more often and we're more comfortable with cleaning that, maybe we can use a harder coating, and then maybe that coating can last longer. Maybe that coating can be a 5-year or a 10-year coating. I mean, back years ago, Maersk was running a 10-year hard coating, a ceramic coating, but unfortunately it fouled, and it didn't become very effective for them. Maybe under this regime it can. If we look at this as silos, we're going to miss problems exactly like that. But this is an opportunity. We can actually look at this as an umbrella and really capture, I think, a lot of other things at the same time. So thank you. It's a great question.
Yeah.
좋은 질문입니다. 근데 앞서 말씀
That's a good question. Regarding what was just mentioned, specifically regarding the microplastic pollution,
릴리즈의 경우에는 해양 환경에서 발생하는 플라스틱 오염에 대해서 어떻게 규율할 것인지를
maritime pollution caused by microplastic has been discussed in the process of developing of the frameworks. So we need to make sure that where the problem caused, as Mark mentioned, we have to talk about how to capture microplastic released by clean ships that should be dealt with under the legally binding framework. But in general, microplastic pollution can be addressed and can be dealt with under other maritime environment conventions or agreements.
Thank you. 일단은 질문.
First, my answer might be directly related to the question or not. We need anti-fouling paint-related discussion. When we make legally binding framework, it doesn't mean that we prefer a specific type of in-water cleaning method. We could either use diver-based method or the robot-based method. Or as the guideline says, we could take some pre-treatment systems like using anti-fouling paintings. There are various approaches through ASF convention. We have been thinking about how we can prevent the attachment of biofouling by using anti-fouling painting. Now we're talking about in-water cleaning. Even if you apply the anti-fouling paint, you still could have the accumulation of biofouling. There's a project with a painting company, and we have been discussing the compatibility between anti-fouling painting and the cleaning system. So what this project is developing is not just anti-fouling, but biofouling, elimination, painting. So we need to further develop technologies. But I hope that you will not misunderstand my comment. We will continue to utilize the existing technologies better, and at the same time, we need to focus on developing new technologies together.
Fantastic. What a wonderful panel of experts to have all together. I have 37 seconds on the clock, and I cannot sum up in 37 seconds, so I do ask for your indulgence as I sum up here. But we've had such a great discussion, and I've grouped it into really three parts: the preconditions for a framework, the policy design elements, and the implementation. And I just tell you the story that I heard so far this morning and on the panel. We have an existing industry and technology that's associated with addressing biofouling. We have divers. We have a lot of innovation going on in this space. But we have needs for more data and science, and in particular, to get industry's experience, to get data from manufacturers and data that's being coordinated by manufacturers. We need to know what's happening in the market in order to know what's promising for the development of this technology and what we can reasonably expect to appear if we regulate it. And the ships are watching too, in terms of developing confidence in being able to buy in to this framework and in order to be able to join the effort. So the question that is open is, how formal should the process be of gathering this information before we regulate at the International Maritime Organization? And the suggestion was to invite submissions to the organization with all of these pieces of data. And of course, that is not the agenda at the organization. The agenda at the organization is to define the instrument and write it. And so that's going to take a shift in perspective at the IMO, and it's going to require people to bring those ideas forward for a discussion. And it'll be really interesting to see how that happens in February, because we don't have a lot of time at the meeting, folks, to have that conversation live on the floor. So that's going to be really interesting. The second piece is the policy design piece. And this is very rich in our conversation. And I'm going to start with Sujin. You talked about the need for social acceptance and I interpret that as the general public wanting to have social acceptance of shipping. And what does that mean? And as well, acceptance within the marine industry, that this is something that we're all going to do. So there needs to be a degree of buy-in on this. And we need the instrument to help guide what are our next steps in that regard. Because right now, nobody can do this by themselves. We need to put this into a regulation so that we can tell the story to the world about what we're doing as an industry to control biofouling. And that means we need to hear from all stakeholders. And we need to recognize that this needs to fit in to the storyline of existing regulatory frameworks that also touch on these issues and discharges. And to those of our colleagues in governments who are already regulating pollution discharge into the water, we need to also bring them along and inform them about what's happening and the trade-offs between invasive species from fouled ships versus the risks of cleaning them, because there's no magic solution here. We should be looking, as we regulate, at feasibility, at economics and efficiency, at ensuring that regulations don't stifle the innovation that we already want to see. We need to take a holistic approach, which includes things like designing coatings and seeking to ensure we know exactly what are the outcomes that we want. For example, on plastics reduction in the ocean, that's not what we started with. But if that's an outcome we want, then we need to build that in. And so we need to regulate exactly what it is we want to regulate, and not other things, and not disrupt what's taking place naturally. And we really need to recognize that some of these actions are already being incentivized in various ways, and people are already taking action when it comes to reducing their costs associated with hull fouling, for example. And we need to assure, in designing the policy, that the ship owner believes that the cleaning will work and that it will protect the ship and that they can prove it when they get to the port of call. And we need to be thinking about the choice of instrument because we may, and I don't mean whether to write a new convention, I mean there are also contractual options that might not need us to regulate if we have the right incentives in place. And so with all of that, we come to implementation. And we want to get an implementation that is prompt and that we avoid the protracted ratification processes and hurting the early movers, as perhaps has been a problem in other conventions. But we also want to make sure that we do it in a standardized way with good testing. And whether we need to approve these systems or verify them, we need that consistency. To ensure that countries have the information they need to implement all of this and make it work. And I'll end with the point, I think, that we need to take the crew into the account. I think that was a very powerful message from Bev, that we do not want to be in a situation where we are stopping our crews from being able to do what they do, creating safety issues, or designing things that are impossible for them to do. And so in closing now, this panel, let me say something that I'm really struck by the degree of agreement that we've had between all kinds of different folks, from national regulators to the industry, to equipment manufacturers, even to treaty lawyers helping us to identify what are the preconditions for advancing with this kind of an instrument, with the economic perspectives and the practical perspectives. And if we can keep this spirit of cooperation, I'm sure that we will get a really great legally binding framework. So thank you for your attention here this morning, and thank you to the members of the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for leading the discussion, Director Hanain, and the panelists for sharing their expertise and insights. Please return to your seats. Please give them another big round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Once again, we extend our sincere appreciation to all the experts for their valuable contribution. We will now conclude the YouTube live stream at this time. We would like to also thank everyone who joined us online. While listening to today's presentations, remind us that there are still many challenges to overcome in making biofouling management mandatory. However, with the continued interest